All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon on a strange Wednesday that kind of feels like a Tuesday after the long weekend. We will be spending the next hour together looking at literacy and student self-assessment of the core competencies. So this is one of our favorite content areas for teaching workshops. And so we're really excited about the content and the stories that we'll share and the activities we'll get you to do. So we will get started. And as always, I want to acknowledge that we're gathering virtually from many different traditional Indigenous territories across BC, and we thank our hosts for the beautiful land that we are collaborating and working and learning and playing on together today. And if you have not been to one of our workshops before, I am Lisa. I'm the program manager for POPEY as well as a teacher consultant, and I'm co-presenting with my lovely colleague, Jen Kelly. As I mentioned, I'm in Vancouver. Jen's up in the Shuswap area of the province, and our contact info is there if you want to get in touch with us at all. If you haven't been to our website, that's where you can grab the handouts. If you got the pre-workshop email, which you probably did because that had the Zoom link, and here you are. It also had links to a print handout you can use and an electronic handout as well, along with all of our other resources there that support K-3 literacy instruction. That QR code at the bottom is another way you can grab a picture of that with your, if you have a phone, and open the e-handout on a device if you would like. We're also recording this session. It will be up on our YouTube channel next week. And we have closed captioning available in the Zoom toolbar if you would like to take advantage of that feature. And so what we'll be looking at in this hour, resources and supports to encourage student reflection and self-assessment in relation to literacy learning and the core competencies. And so we'll be doing that through sharing some of the theory. Most of our time will be spent on Jen and I doing modeling and demonstrations of how it can look and what it can look like in the classroom. And then we'll be getting you to engage, reflect, chat, and share your own reflections and self-assessments in relation to a few of the selected core competencies that we'll focus in on today for some examples of how this can look in your classrooms and with your students. And this info here comes right out of the BC Ministries resources online on the curriculum page to do with the core competencies. And it really talks about the importance of ongoing assessment and those assessment conversations that we want to model and demonstrate for our students. Of course, we think of these always in terms of the curriculum, but we want to make sure that that includes the possibility to be talking about and reflecting on students' strengths and growth in relation to the core competencies. And part of the way we can support that ongoing assessment and those conversations and connections with our students is asking them open-ended questions, giving them prompts so they can do that self-reflection, and talking about metacognition and demonstrating it, supporting it, using think alouds to model what reflection can look like, and then giving students that opportunity to own their learning and giving them also those opportunities to document their learning and how they reflect on themselves as learners and as citizens. When we're thinking of the core competencies, we're really thinking about all of those elements and aspects that go into them being wonderful, kind, caring, and supportive citizens of both their classroom and their community and in their family and beyond. And with all these self-monitoring skills, students don't just automatically know how to do this. So just like we're teaching them the literacy foundations and reading and writing, we need to teach them how they can monitor for their own understanding and check. Just like we do when they're reading, we want to think about that and give them time to reflect on how are they doing as learners? Are they struggling with something? What's their motivation? How engaged are they? And do they have that sense of accomplishment that they know they're progressing along a continuum as they're developing those social skills and the self-regulation, the communication, collaboration, citizenship, and all of those elements that we talk about when we think of the core competencies. And so some of the things we can do to support and encourage our students in self-reflection and self-assessment is giving them a variety of options for how they document that self-assessment piece. And so here's a really nice list of a good range of different types of activities that we could offer our students up as choices. So they could choose 1 or 2 or 3 of these to share what they know, their reflection on how they're doing, if they're assessing how they've done with something. Obviously, we usually think of this in terms of the curriculum. So maybe at the end of a unit or a theme we've been studying in social studies or science, or wrapping up something in literacy, whether it's related to literature circles or read aloud or a novel study we've been doing. But we also can use these to have students represent their growth on that continuum with the core competencies. So our first activity today is going to hear from you to share with us the top 3 ways that you would like to show what you know. So if we gave you these choices and said you can show what you know any way you'd like, pick your top 3. So I'm going to put 30 seconds on the clock and a very short music timer and get you to choose what your top 3 are. Type those 3 into the chat box, and then when that 30-second timer stops and the music ends, you can hit enter. And what we'll see in the chat box is the big waterfall. We were over 100 people here this afternoon. You will see just how diverse and unique and different we all are, and probably we'll see a huge range of all of these different ways that we can do assessment to show what we know. So if you scroll up and look through in the chat box to see this, it's wonderful. So what we can see, what I take from this is everyone has different talents and gifts and strengths and interests and predispositions for what we like, our favorites. And we probably feel really confident about those. So just thinking about how you would feel having to share something, your knowledge or your learning or your understanding in your chosen ways, versus me telling you, okay, everyone, I'll just get you to go off just real quick, come back in 20 minutes, just go record a podcast. If that's not your thing, probably it will stress you out and you will feel uncomfortable, and you're not going to be able to really focus on the content and sharing the something that you're supposed to be sharing your understanding about. So thinking about that, we're a class here of 100. I think no 2 lists of 3 were the same. And so thinking about how can we offer these to all of our students in our class for them to have choice and ownership, to connect with options that resonate and support their gifts and their strengths and their talents, to communicate that really rich and important language with us about how they see themselves as learners and as people. And it also gives us that information on areas where we might be able to support them as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us.
I was just reflecting, Lisa, on that activity and thinking how wonderful it would be to do that activity with your upper primary students and get them to reflect on their favorite 3, and then have that class discussion that there is a lot of choice available to students, but also that there's not a hierarchy of ways to represent, so that students could make a puppet show. They could also make a illustration. They could also do some writing, but there's not a hierarchy of how to represent, which was honor their diverse abilities, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point. Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a look at, dig into these core competencies. So we're pretty familiar with core competencies these days. We've had them around for a couple of years now and worked with them with our students, especially at the primary level. So we liked in Poppyland to kind of simplify the language and make it kid-friendly, student-friendly, so that you can work with your students in ways that they understand what they are reflecting on. So really, essentially, what we're working with core competencies is stuff that they can do, stuff they know, and actions to use. So really quite simple when we break it down like that. And that's really stuff they can do, stuff they know, actions they use when they work by themselves or with others, when they manage emotions, and when they make good decisions. So I think that makes it a little bit more understandable for our students and for us as educators, so that we can get our heads around what it is that we need to explain to our students for the core competencies. So today we are going to dive into our core competencies. These are our 3 areas: communication, thinking, personal, and social. And we're going to take a deeper look at what this can look like in our classrooms in context to do with their self-assessments in these areas, because we know that that is foremost on many teachers' minds right now, coming to the end of the year here. So communication is really about how students communicate with others and how they present information. Collaboration is working with others, how we work with others, how we communicate with others, and how we have those group interactions. Critical thinking is really creating and evaluating our thinking, our critical thinking, critical and reflective thinking. We're looking at analyzing, designing, reflecting. And of course, personal and social is really about having a good sense of self and who we are with others. So who we are in ourselves with others and how we interact. So just a very quick overview, because we know that you guys have been living, breathing core competencies for quite a while now. So on our POPEY website, we have some documents that we're going to be showing you today, but also that you can use in your classroom with your students. And I'm just going to take you on a quick tour of our website so that you can find them easily if you would like to. So we have here on our main page, we have BC curriculum circled over in the corner, so you can click on that. And then you can go to core competencies here. And we have specifically core competency self-reflections and self-assessments. So this is where you want to go to get those final documents, the ones that we're going to share with you today throughout the presentation. And they are broken up into our 3 areas, and then beyond that into the different areas in each of the core competencies. And of course, you can get editable versions of these documents so that you can make them your own, make them work for your students in your context. Even if you are working with K students or whoever you're working with, you can make it work for you. So let's take a closer look at this. So this really describes how POPEY used the profiles that came from the ministry and really simplified the language so that we can use these with our students in really easy, palatable ways so that our students understand them and so that they're meaningful documents. What I'd like to draw your attention to now is that students can do so many things with the following pages that we're going to show you. They can draw, they can write, they can paste an image, embed a video, paste a link. As well, this is like the paper copy that we can be using for our self-assessments. But what Lisa shared with you early on, there are so many different ways that students can represent their understanding and their thinking about core competencies through many, many different ways. I know I've been watching social media recently and seeing different districts coming up and sharing different ways that they're developing and documenting students' core competency self-reflection. Specifically, I'm thinking of Kamloops ST73. Shout out to you guys, because you are sharing how to make digital portfolios for this. So just appreciate all the sharing that's going on in BC right now. It's great. Okay, so this is what it can look like for you. If we take a look at a K-3 self-assessment in communicating, this self-assessment is around answering simple, direct questions about activities and experiences. So let's see what that can look like. Okay, so Lisa reflected that she was able to share 3 of her favorite things with her group. Her favorite book is Paper Bag Princess. Nice one. Good choice, Lisa. Sport, volleyball, and food tacos. And she even backed it up with a very fabulous illustration showing how much she loves tacos. Okay, so you can see how easy this can be. And also, I'd like to point out that there is room for differentiation within this activity. So all of our students have a place where they can access some form of representation of their thinking within this document. So whether it is an illustration, a simple sentence, or some more explanation explaining evidence or reasons why students have come up with that, that statement. So we'll show you a couple more. Here's social awareness and responsibility about kindness and being helpful. Let's see what Lisa has to say about this. She's very supportive. You can see from her illustration here that she is all about asking how to support you. And that's actually very true. Lisa is incredibly supportive. So I check in with my friends when they seem sad, a simple statement to support her illustration. And then even more information. I try to cheer them up by making them laugh or by offering to play a game with them. So some more evidence, some more reasons to back up her simple statement before, seeing how there's many layers of representation that fits all of our students with diverse abilities. Okay, I'm gonna hand this over to you, Lisa. Is that right?
All right, yes.
Thought I had that right.
Thank you. So you could see there with my little Bitmojis there, my self-portraits, I identify as not a good artist. And so that would not be my go-to to draw, but if I wasn't writing yet, I would draw. So using my Bitmoji was a little bit of a cheat, but it could just be a picture. And like Jen said, a really simple statement or a more complex statement with a couple of sentences. So we just wanted to show the differentiation options, as Jen said. So what we're doing today is focusing in, and we're going to share 4 different read alouds with you and cycle through connecting the read alouds to one element of the core competencies across the communication, thinking, and personal and social facets, and then modeling what those rich and thoughtful and reflective conversations can be like based on the story, the mentor text that we've shared, and using that as a point, an opportunity for us to do the really beautiful and explicit demonstrating and modeling how we self-reflect on how we relate to the book and the competency being demonstrated or maybe not being demonstrated. And then we support and encourage the students to do that same self-reflection and to document it on one of these pages that we've created that we have been showing you the samples of. So the really nice thing with using mentor text, and I think we all know this, like Jen said, we've been living this for a few years now. Students get a sense of working through life experiences, even challenges and obstacles when they can see some objective third person in a book going through something that maybe they can relate to. So there's a little bit of safety there when there's some distance and objectivity, and that may be a nice gateway in for them to be able to talk about how a time they felt worried or scared or nervous or sad or frustrated, and maybe how they resolved it or what are some options available to them for problem solving and caring for themselves. So the books can be almost like that extra teacher in the classroom to model and demonstrate problem solving, communication, and thinking skills across those areas. So while it's also supporting literacy, it's a really lovely and intentional and natural thread weaving the core competencies into it. And there's such a collection of so many beautiful, beautiful books. It just seems like more and more are coming out all the time. And so the books that we're sharing are just samples that we chose because we like them, but there's a ton. And at the end of the e-handout, we've got about 6 or 8 pages that are just full book lists to support different elements of the core competencies. So that's available to you as well. So our very first read aloud that we will do is the more we get together. So on this first read aloud, these bullet points here, really this is us setting it up for you as you could do it with students that you're supporting. So this is kind of a little bit of a plan, and we will informally go through this together. So here we would talk about what are some fun things that we can do with others, with our friends or our family, our neighbors, our classmates. And then how can we cooperate with others to play and work together? So that builds a little bit on the fun things and focuses in on positive connections and communication, cooperation. We might talk about what cooperation means, because that's a big word with lots of syllables. And then thinking about a time when we used cooperation to connect with someone and maybe to help someone or to get some help. And then inviting students to reflect and share on that. And then we would look to a sample self-assessment page, discussing that range of options for really simple, a picture or a statement or a word or a few sentences, adding in, like Jen said, a link to something or a video or a photo or a Bitmoji maybe, if you're artistically challenged like me. So first of all, this is sort of mimicking our class discussion and our think aloud together. If you can think of a time you cooperated with others or one other person, if you're comfortable doing so, feel free to share that in the chat box with us. So, and I think we'll all benefit from samples of or examples of times people have cooperated. And maybe we'll get a sense of all the different ways that word can have meaning for us. So you can check out the chat box. I see we've got some new ones in there already. Thank you very much. Branding time. Thanks, Robert. That's probably not on everybody's list of cooperative actions in their neighborhood, depending on where they are. Planning sports day, sharing ideas for spelling, planning Pro D, fundraising for the Heart and Stroke Foundation, building a playground. These are really beautiful. You can't beat elementary and primary teachers. I'll just say that. I may be a little bit biased, but. So this would be a really rich conversation if we were in a class sitting together all in the same space, but we're doing it a little bit virtually, but you get the idea. So sharing this is really inspiring. And that might remind me that, you know, I haven't done any fundraising in a while. I'm going to think about that next week, once I get through a bit more of my report cards, whatever. So the self-assessment page that we pulled out to go with this story, the more we get together, there were several that we could have chosen from the big document, but this one we really liked. In familiar situations, I can cooperate with others. So, and you've just given tons and tons of really wonderful examples of that in action. So that's a support for the students before they start to do their own reflection and self-assessment. They're hearing their peers talk about examples of it and what it looks like to more fully understand that essence of cooperation. So here again, I would introduce this to my students, talking about how they could draw, color, and label a picture, writing down an example and adding a picture, and building up in complexity. But the nice thing about this is that there's an easy access point for everyone to engage with it. And as we also said, there's that huge list of things that you chose from at the beginning. Those are also available as well for them to show how they can cooperate with others. So our sample here for this one, and this is Jen's. Look at these lovely flowers on her deck. So at the simplest level, she could just have a picture, whether she drew it or inserted an image. And also a simple and brief statement, Steve and I planted flowers together. And a little bit more advanced, we decided which flowers would look nice together and where to put the pots on the deck. Then we planted the flowers in one pot at a time. So that's a really wonderful sample of cooperation with varying degrees of complexity and ability in terms of that self-reflection and the self-assessment. So what we're going to get you to do now, if you have the print handout, you've got this in there for you to work on, but any old piece of paper can do. And if you wanted to just record a short little podcast about how you cooperate with others, feel free. It's kind of funny. I use that as my sample of not giving you choice, because when I scrolled back up through them all, nobody had said podcast. So that was kind of actually a good example of something nobody wanted to do. So something, maybe this is just further illustrating or expanding on what you shared in the chat box, or maybe it's another time you cooperated. So we'll give you a minute and a half to reflect on this and create something for the purposes of our workshop, that we're modeling this for students, but that we're all educators. We can do some writing or some drawing, go with your talents and your gifts. And what we want to do after this is stop sharing the screen. And if you want to share what you've drawn, we'd love for you to turn on your camera. If it's not, and just hold up your paper to us so that we can see. And then maybe we'll get to see a nice sampling of a few people's self-assessment about cooperation.
Oh, goodness.
There we go. Can you see that? There we go. Oh, such a good story about creative thinking and perseverance and not giving up and managing your emotions even. So a lot there for rich conversation. Again, these are some talking points. What was exciting about her idea? What was challenging or frustrating? And how did she handle her frustration when things weren't going well? We could expand on that and talk about, I could ask you, what do you do with your new ideas, and what happens for you if they don't work out? So we could talk about that. We invite all of you, you can share about a time you had a great idea that excited you, or a time when an idea maybe challenged you. So feel free to share something in the chat box with us if you would like. So the same thing here, looking at the self-assessment on, I make my ideas work, or I change what I'm doing. And that in itself is simple, but it is also, it's complex in that the student would have to have the understanding that what they're trying isn't working. Even that in itself is a big win. And then looking at other ways to change it up to make it work. And that could be with their writing, or with their reading, or building something, or how they're getting along with a friend. So lots of possibilities there. And our sample here, it's kind of funny, it worked out that I have Jen's samples from her life. So here's Jen's example. Do you want to speak to this, Jen, and I'll reveal the pictures?
Sure. So my husband and I were working on creating built-in closets for, built-in boxes. So we built these boxes. You can see that they're like 8 feet high. Our ceilings are 9 feet high. So it was a little tricky. And they were down in our garage, which is on the first floor. And we had to get them up the stairs, up the windy stairs, and through bedroom door, and then through closet door and upright. Well, it didn't work according to plan. We were at that point where the little girl was, where we were very mad. Anyways, we either had to make the cabinet or the boxes smaller, the closet boxes smaller, or the door bigger. So we decided to make the door bigger, and that's how we've solved this problem. Oh yeah, it was an adventure.
So thank you, Jen. So a few ways to respond here with the images, whether that's a photo or a drawing. And then the statement, I figured out how to solve the problem, thought about how they could make the cabinet smaller or the doorway bigger. And going with the doorway being made bigger was the solution that saved your day and allowed you to keep all the hard work you'd invested in your cabinets. So I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead on this, but again, you could reflect and write your own self-assessment, self-reflection on making your ideas work, a time you did that. I'll just say this while I'm thinking of it now. Any of these, if you've even done one of these self-assessments, but hopefully by the end you'll have 3, showing these to your students, even tomorrow, that you did a workshop and you had some stories read out loud to you and you had a discussion about it and everybody shared. And then that got you thinking about yourself, and you wrote down your response to show how you were doing with these different competencies. The kids might be really excited to see what you did after school today.
Okay, we're going to take a look at this story called Kindness is My Superpower, and start to think about what your superpower might be. So as Lisa pointed out before, we can really have that whole class discussion to scaffold the work that we're doing with our students, so we can have them think, learn from others through a whole class discussion. What is their superpower? How do they help others? And then model that think aloud. So again, a further scaffolded step to allow our students to see what that looks like in action. And then an invitation for our students to reflect and share an example orally before the written work or the representation of their thinking. So let's take a look at what that can look like in this context. So looking at positive personal and cultural identity in the context of superpower, I can describe some of the qualities that make me special. And I'll give you an example of Lisa's. So Lisa is amazing. Her superpower is music trivia. And you can see how she's rocking out there in the Bitmoji. So that is a quality that makes her special. She is very good at music trivia. And then another level, she's going to tell us a little bit more about why she's good at music trivia. Because she helped her team win the finals and got a bunch of prizes. Isn't that amazing? We have a music trivia genius amongst us, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's see what you can come up with. So I skipped ahead just so that we could have some ideas about how you can describe some of the qualities that make you special. Love it. Nice work, everyone. Okay, we're going to continue on to our last read aloud. One of my faves. This is going to bring us into that critical thinking, critical analysis aspect of core competencies. And we'll talk about something that all primary students love to talk about, spiders. Okay, so yeah, we have some strong opinions about spiders, either for or against. Now, what you can do with your class is, again, go through that class discussion. Love them, hate them, why? Let's think about our facts and reasons. And then have students reflect and share examples orally before going to the place of self-assessment. And why do you feel that way about them, and sharing one or two reasons. So providing that evidence is going to give our students that ability to provide to critically think about their opinions. Okay, so if we look at this one, we're looking at, I can show if I like something or not. So we're going to see if Lisa likes spiders. So a graphic to show her opinions, and then some written responses, and then some more reasons. I can show I don't like them by running away, or by saying, go away, you're scaring me. You are scaring me.
Those are my survival strategies. That's right. Yeah.
Let's see what you think. So we're going to give you 90 seconds here. How can you show if you like something or not? What's your self-assessment on that? 90 seconds. Feel free to pop it into the chat box. So we're going to end with this quote, or kind of do our wrap up here, starting our wrap up. This picture makes me think of spring, makes me think of right now, these beautiful flowers. So building relationships by simply taking opportunities to talk with our students about how self-reflection can support them in achieving their learning goals and can help them jumpstart the self-assessment process. So really looking at that talking, that oral piece that we've built into our activities today, and then that scaffolded support to give students the language and the ability to voice their opinions and to voice their reasons is so important in that self-assessment process. And again, we just want to we have to go back to the Muppets, because who doesn't love Muppets? Thank you to the teachers. We are almost in June. Hold on, you're gonna get there. This is a crazy year, and we just have been given so much optimism recently in our province. So hold on to that as we end with our final month. So today we had a chance to look at the core competency self-assessment documents that POPEY's created. We did some read aloud, some teacher think alouds, class discussion to really go with our mentor texts and allow our students to have that third point of reference there. So our question for you is, what feels like a good next step for you and your students? Where are you with your self-assessment? What's your ideas? Feel free to share in the chat box. We would love to hear from you. Where are your next steps? Here are the resources that we used to build your workshop today. As Lisa mentioned earlier, that in our e-handout, there's a ton of book suggestions at the back of the e-handout, so that if you wanted to take a closer look at reflective thinking, then you can go there and have lots of book suggestions there.
I'll just point out too, Jen, that
yes,
first
please.
link on the top left, that's a link that will take you directly to the core competency self-assessment document page of our website. So then you can choose from the communication, thinking, and personal and social, and just print off. If you want to pick one to use with your students to go with the read aloud, you can just print one and make some copies of it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So again, here is our contact information if you have any questions. If you have any questions about what we've talked about today, or resources, or finding resources on our website, please feel free to contact us. If you don't have the e-handout for today and you'd like to refer back to it, maybe check out the book list or something like that, you can get there from going to our POPEY homepage and then the professional learning watering can, and then clicking on POPEY e-handouts, and that will give you access to today's e-handout.